Hello and welcome everyone to the Speakeasy podcast number 7. Today we're going to be talking about game publishing, but before that, here are my co-hosts. Let's have a look at where everyone is. Scotty, MrBrotaku,
What's up?
OPNerd,
Lucky number 7. Thank you all for joining us. Good to see you again.
and Mr. Lieutenant Royal Shrimp. Dr. Professor
Hello.
Mr. Lieutenant Royal Shrimp.
PhD.
Yeah. For the first news item today, of course it's time for the news, we are going to talk about The Curious Expedition, which is an indie game that is in early access right now. You know, we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel into all these early access games, but The Curious Expedition, or just Curious Expedition, has released on early access and it looks pretty cool. Did you guys take a look at it?
Yes. I did.
Yeah, no interest on my end whatsoever. You
Not
probably
on
already
mine
know that.
either.
I mean, I like roguelikes, but this just doesn't seem to kind of hit my palate. I see where you're finding it interesting, but for me, not really my kind of roguelike, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Well, Curious Expedition is a roguelike, as Mr. Brotaku brought up. As you're seeing on screen right now, or you might have seen, it's an exploration game. You have a little team of people, you've got to survive exploring across a hexagonal map. You encounter different combat scenarios, and you go to towns and all that kind of stuff. So it's a new take on a genre that has been totally saturated in the indie scene for a little, well, not exactly saturated, but everything must be roguelike. It's a roguelike, guys. It's got roguelike elements. Roguelike. It's a roguelike, and you roguelikes out roguelike.
And it has to have graphics that look like the game was made no later than, I don't know, 1992 or so.
Yeah, so it's the current state of indie gaming as far as 8-bit graphics, or 8-bit graphics. It's a roguelike, it's about survival, it's, this and that, but it's different to all the other indie roguelike 8-bit graphic, games that are coming out at the moment, so...
Well, they're all different. That's what the developers would tell you. This is
Yeah.
what makes our roguelike different from all the other roguelikes.
Games that are exactly the same as this one. Yeah. So there you go, interesting little game. I've seen some people streaming it seems fun.
I mean, it
Not
seems like
too
it's
unique,
well put.
but-
It seems like it's well put together, and I mean, it looks like it's the time and care has been put into it to make it something that's well packaged and presentable. So I mean, there's that.
I mean,
Yeah.
the characters, whereas most, roguelikes don't necessarily have any characters that have any specific personalities. Obviously, the inclusion of characters, including real life or, live or dead, makes it interesting. That's one thing that stands out. Other than that, not even on my radar.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up is just because we did a whole episode on early access, right? And this game is just an example of a good early access game on launch, where it's got a lot of content. It's got a lot of gameplay. It's pretty polished. It's just missing a lot of the content that it needs. So a lot of the random elements aren't in there yet. Different towns you can visit and different characters to play and different this and that. But the core game is there, and you can play it for a lot of hours already. That's kind of a key thing about early access games that they get wrong
Man,
a lot of the time.
I wish I'd been there for that discussion. I would have so much to add to that. I think, like, the whole early access is kind of it's like a plague on the community right now. But
For the
we've already
most
had
part,
this
I agree.
discussion, Yeah.
Yeah. Go watch the other podcast if you guys want to hear about early access. Anyway, I think we've said what we will about the Curious Expedition. The next piece of news is another game release, Neon Struct, and this one I find a lot more interesting. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm very much into shooters, not as much as I used to be, and also very much into stealth. I like the option, at least, to sneak through some areas as opposed to shooting and blowing everything up. So I watched the little videos they had up on the site, and it does look interesting. Obviously, graphically, they're they're keeping the graphics pretty basic but functional. And who knows, maybe that could improve over time. But if the gameplay's there, I wouldn't care how it looked as long as it was interesting. So that's probably one that I would keep an eye on.
A key thing about this game that I care about, because is it a full release? Yeah, it's a full release. I get confused now with all these early access games coming out. I'm like, wait, is it a full release? But it has a demo available.
Yeah,
Praise
Wow.
praise the game development gods.
pretty unusual. these
Yeah.
days.
That's crazy.
And it's
Although
actually a big demo as well.
I'd like to point out that most betas and alphas nowadays are also demos. They just
Well-
call them betas and alphas.
And they make you pay for them.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
too.
demo.
It's
is
a free demo.
A demo is free.
Yeah, it's a free demo. You can go and visit. I put a link in the chat for anybody that's interested, or you can just look up Neon Struct on the internet or on Steam and find the game demo available. So it's on sale right now as well. So if you guys find it, I think it's a really good game just because it's not the same game as every other game. It's it's a stealth first-person kind of action game. So there are a few of those. There's Dishonored, and there is you can do that kind of stuff in Skyrim and Oblivion, other games. But and Thief, that'd be the main one. But I played the demo, and there's not so much combat. You can take down people, but it's more about it really is sneaking around. You check around corners, wait for the guards to go by, find secrets hidden in the levels, get key cards and things like that. So it's really a stealth game at its core. So I really like what I've played of it. Oh, a
I
Deus
also
Ex
love
as well.
The little Star Wars walkers they got in there too. Those are pretty nice.
Yeah.
Mm.
Are you looking at one of the screenshots on the store page?
Yeah,
for it?
yeah, they got the.
The,
it
look, the,
looks
one,
exact-
look, the thing with the question mark over its
It's
head.
like a little baby.
It does. It does. It's like a baby. Not the the ATST. Yeah.
All right, if we're done with that, we're on. There's a quick news section because there wasn't much news this week. We're on to the topic of the day, which is game publishing. So, more than just game publishers, what everybody thinks of would be EA, Ubisoft, Bethesda as a game publisher, other things like that. But things like Steam Greenlight and self-publishing and other ways that you publish your game to the big wide world.
I think it is important at least to mention, because some people may not be aware. A lot of people don't put too much thought into where games come from necessarily.
Mhm.
They just buy them when they're available, and they read up on a game maybe before it's released. But just a quick distinction between a publisher and a developer. Sometimes a company may be both, and sometimes they may publish certain games and be the developer as well as publishers or others. But specifically, developers are the people that actually sit there and code the game. They have the artists that make the art assets, and they're responsible for the finished product that you get, bugs and all. Whereas the publisher is generally, if they're not also developing the games themselves, the publishers fund the game development. That's why you have sites like Kickstarter, for example, for companies that don't want to go that route, or for individuals or small teams that can't go that route, that can't get a big publisher to fund their games. The publisher says, okay, here's the money. We're going to basically pay your employees' salaries while you make the game. Of course, they get generally a very huge percentage of the sales, and there are other things that they do that we'll talk about during this discussion. But just in case, for those of you that weren't aware, the difference between the two.
So one thing I want to talk about with publishers, and this is the thing that, a lot of people talk about, but I'm sure a lot of people don't listen to so much, is why people hate publishers. Why do you hear, fuck EA, fuck Ubisoft, fuck Konami, especially Konami recently? Why do you hear that? And this is the negative side of big AAA publishers. Now, publishers, being that they fund games, they directly say, if you're an indie developer, you make a game, takes 3 years or 5 years, and then you put it out and you start making money. If you're a big studio and you want to make a big game, you need to be funded before you've finished it. Otherwise, you can't make it. You need to pay people salaries and you need to pay people to work for you. So, publishers say, hey, since we're funding you, we need to make shitloads of money back. We need to make $10 million, not the crappy 6 million or whatever, or 6 million sales or whatever, 10 million sales. What happened with the Tomb Raider reboot? They only had 6 million or 4 million sales and called it a disappointment. Anyway, they push developers to work as fast as possible. And keep in mind, though, these big teams, a lot of them are just like, hey, you need to work on the lighting system in this game. And they're like, I don't care about that, but I've got to get it done by Wednesday. People who don't care about what they're doing get paid by publishers who don't care about the game. They only care about the money in this, everybody hates publishers scenario. And this causes game development to be way too fast, games come out way too buggy, and games get cancelled when they don't get well received just because they're not going to make enough money. Yeah, games like Assassin's Creed, where it comes out and it's a fairly original idea, and then the publisher's like, oh, we can make a little bit of money on this. Make another one, make another one, make another one. And then they come out and they're buggy as crap, and they come out every year, and, So, just to give you a very general idea of why people hate publishers, there you go.
There's other
Well,
reasons for that too, I think. I mean, if you look at games pre-internet era, those games they took, they smaller teams, less time to make, but they had to be polished and they had to
Hmm?
be good because once you release them, there were no bug fixes, right? That was the game. If there was a glitch, like in
Mario
Nintendo or like
64.
Mario 64, exactly, now everyone can exploit that, and there's no way to ever patch that. That's in the game forever. But nowadays, a publisher can force a team to put out, like a dev team, to put out a game earlier, and then we'll just patch it later. I mean,
Hmm.
look at games like Battlefield. That game was, it was just straight up broken at launch. Now, over the course of the years, or year, I don't know how long has it been. It's been quite a while now.
it's a year and a
The
half.
game is great. Year and a half, yeah. The game is great now. I mean, it's really fun. There's been huge improvements. There's very little bugs and issues left with it, but it's taken a year and a half after release, after people gave, after I paid 60, 70, 80. I mean, I paid a lot more than that because I paid $60 for the game and then $50 for premium
Hmm.
Battlelog or Battlefront Premium. So there's $110 of my money for a game that at launch doesn't even work, but the publisher's like, we'll just patch it later. The devs, they've got this. So there's more issues associated with that, or more issues came up once the internet came around. So
I think
it's another reason.
a lot of it you see with companies that you start to hear bad things about is patterns. People get into these patterns. Some people don't like Bethesda because their games are glitchy and they don't want to work on PC.
I like how
that.
you say glitchy. They're glitchy.
They're glitchy. Okay, I'm just biased as hell. Okay, I'm super biased. You know me. But anyways, you get into these patterns where or people pull something like Ubisoft did with what was it Ubisoft that pulled it with Watch Dogs?
Yeah.
When they pulled something like that, and then you heard, they're gonna try to do the same thing to Far Cry 4, and you're just like, well, I'm gonna stop buying games from Ubisoft. They're gonna keep being dicks to me when when they're making games. I'm like,
Rayman was good though.
yeah, it was really good. But my point is just patterns. People get into
Yeah.
these patterns and of things that you don't like, and you're just like, well, screw this company. I'm just gonna stop using it.
Not to play devil's advocate, but yeah, I think it's important to understand one of the major reasons that publishers put pressure on developers to either include things or rush it out the door, whatever the case may be. The vast majority of the big publishers, like all the ones we've mentioned, EA, Ubisoft, they are publicly owned. If you don't know how stocks work, what that means is that the company is, for the most part, gets its money from shareholders. Anybody, you or I, anybody involved in this podcast, watching, your grandma, your dog, can buy stock in a company. And major shareholders, people that have invested a large amount of money in the company, of course, want to see a return on their investment. They want to get back more money than they put into the company. And so they, regardless of how much they know about the gaming industry, if anything, they put pressure on the company owners, like the CEO and so forth, to make a game profitable. And they may or may not make suggestions as to how they think that should be done. But the fact is that a lot of people have their fingers in the pie, so to speak. And when those fingers are also the fingers that dole out the cash so that the game can be made, they are to a certain extent going to get their way. Now, whether or not you feel that's right or wrong, or whether or not they should not be involved, that's the way it is, and it's understandable. I mean, if I owned a good chunk of a company, enough where my influence would be listened to, I would certainly have my ideas about how things should be run, and how our product should be packaged and marketed and things of that nature. So that's why those things happen.
Yeah. Blakeo said something interesting in the chat. He said, I assume Blakeo is a guy, so I'll say he. Being that his name is Blake. That publishers push out games in an alpha state. I don't know if I would call it alpha, but beta, certainly. I don't know, the words alpha and beta have lost a lot of meaning in the last few years. But they push out a game in beta, make supporting money off that, and before they finish the game, they say, we've made enough money, move on to the next one. We can't squeeze much more blood out of this stone without paying really sophisticated dev teams to go in and really increase the quality of the game. So, but that just made me think of early access games again. You know, it almost seems like early access and indie devs in early access are an exaggerated version of AAA publishers where they release a totally unfinished game for full price, as far as indie full price goes, and say they'll patch it along the way. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but then they just abandon it and they're like, "Oh, I've made my money out of it. It's fine."
Well, and either way, you're taking
This
the
is
risk
okay.
because you're putting your money into the game, you know, and then hoping that you're hoping that they're gonna fix the game.
Well, the when I was talking a moment ago about how the general public can buy into these public companies and expect profitability, you're kind of doing the same thing if you support a crowd-funded project, you know, because the developers usually say that they listen to the feedback of the people that have contributed to and invested in their game in order to provide a game that the people that are paying for it are going to like. So it's in a lot of ways they run into the same problems, especially, you know, if a crowdfunded game is really popular and it has a lot of backers, well, all of those backers are going to have very differing opinions on what should be in the game, what shouldn't be, the best way to implement things, and so forth. And so even as an indie developer, you still run into the same problem if you use that crowd sourcing model of having to answer to your investors and try to please them. Otherwise, you know, they could, you know, because until the Kickstarter project has met its goal and is ready to collect the money, a backer can back out at any time. So same problem persists.
You know, that makes me think, now that you put it in those words, I kind of think when you back a crowdfunded game, it's not a finished game yet. Most finished indie games will be a niche game, a fairly large niche, but a niche game. When you think ukulele, you think 3D platformers. A lot of people don't want to play 3D platformers. OPNerd. But people back them thinking, oh, it's a 3D platformer. When ukulele reaches its final state, it might be in more of a niche. It's pretty clear at this point what it'll be, but I'm just giving it as an example. It might be more of a niche than people expected. And so people who back the game give the feedback about what they want, but they're the smaller voice in the crowd, and they inevitably get disappointed by backing a game that turned into something that they wanted something else. You know, if you back a crowdfunded game, inevitably I think a large percentage of those people at least won't be fully fulfilled, it's a weird way to put it, by the game. They'll be disappointed by things that aren't in it and disappointed with the direction it finally took.
Yeah,
Well,
but you have that in every case. I mean, look at the huge crowdfunding success Star Citizen, right? They're still raking in millions. They just hit what is it, like 80
$50
million?
gajillion?
I don't know, some ridiculous amount of money. And they just also hit 900,000 like registered users, I guess, or people who, I'm not sure if it's people who backed or just registered on their site, but either way, it's a huge number. They're not going to make every single one of them happy. At some point, you just have to draw the line and say, okay, you know what? You gave me your money, but unfortunately, that exact thing you want is just not going to be in there. It's just, you know, it's not realistic. So
there is one very, very important distinction, though, between a game being published by a big developer, let's just say EA, for example, and a crowdfunded project. And that is that many times, even before a developer has started work on a game, a company like EA has agreed to fund it, to go ahead and publish it and provide the money. And so at some point, although it may be buggy, although it may not have all the features that they promised, or they've been toned down, or whatever the case may be, you do get a finished product when it is officially available for sale. Whereas with these early access and crowdfunded things, you're sort of playing the game as it develops, and in the end, there is no guarantee that it will ever be finished. When a AAA publisher puts a disc in a box and sends it to retail shelves or puts it up on Steam, you know, you are getting, in ideally, a finished product, even though it may be buggy, even though it may need some tweaking. So that is something to be said for publishing. It's not always a guarantee, because obviously some games do get canceled. A lot of games, actually, tons of games get canceled before they ever see the light of day, that are going to be published by the big publishers. But the people that were working on the game got paid for the work that they did.
yeah. Also, I guess I'm also playing devil's advocate here, but
We call
let
them
me
the
put it.
devils, but are they really?
Maybe we don't know.
In
But
EA's case, yes.
for AAA games to meet the quality and expectations that people want nowadays, you need publishers. Most of these game companies or these devs, they don't have enough money on their own to fund these games. I mean, Battlefield, it's a huge franchise. Those are huge games. I mean, look at games like Star Wars: The Old Republic, the MMO. I think that cost upwards of $300 million by the end of its
Mm,
dev cycle. That was not, that was a BioWare game, but BioWare itself, they had made so many other games previously, and they themselves are, they're essentially their own publisher. I mean, now they're with, what is it, EA?
EA.
I don't know if they were I guess they were with EA at the time, but either way, that's so much money. Most studios don't have access to that, right?
a
So they need a
good
publisher.
one thing to be aware of, and this is something that fits into the discussion, a good chunk of that money was spent on marketing. And that is
Yes.
another advantage that you get with a well-funded publisher, especially if they think your game can make them a lot of money. They spend their money to promote and market the game. The trade-off is of course, is that the people that make the game get paid to make the game uh, before it's ever released, and then they really don't make much money after that. The publisher keeps the majority of the profit, and if the games meet certain sales metrics, certain sales goals, then they may start to get bonuses and additional money, but there's no guarantee. You never really know if your game's going to catch on with the public, regardless of how good it may or may not be.
You know how you said AAA games really require this huge funding from publishers? That's becoming less true, which I'm really happy about. It will still be true for a long time, but if you think about the big indie games that have happened, there was, I can't even remember what it's called. What are the black splodges and you build a little ladder and they go along? Came out years ago.
Uh,
The World of
what?
Goo? Or?
World of Goo, yeah. World
Ah.
of Goo was a big indie game. People were like, wow, this was made by one guy or two guys, or whatever. This is huge. And then there was, Braid, huge, just a 2D platform with the time mechanics, right? Fizz, 2D, and it's got some interesting technology with the 3D rotations. I love these games, by the way, that I'm mentioning. Oh, World of Goo, yeah. But Braid and Fizz, and then there's Minecraft that comes out, but the graphics are terrible, and it's, but it's this interesting procedurally generated. I say terrible, I mean, get a texture pack and it's alright, but now, Unreal Engine 4 is free to use. You have to pay it once you make more than $3,000 in a 3-month period on it. Unity has a free version that you can upgrade. You can buy assets from this and that. So you still can't do massively expensive things like voice acting. That's going to cost a massive amount of money to get really high quality voice acting from like good actors and things, like Albus Dumbledore in ESO. Oh, love that they did that, but what a big waste of money. But indie developers soon will be able to make games of a similar caliber to, or even now they can, to games made in the Unreal Engine by big publishers. Like, they could make Unreal Tournament. Unreal Tournament is a pretty big game, looks amazing, doesn't have significant voice acting or story, this kind of stuff, but indies could make that now. Maybe at some point, I don't know whether it's going to be through automatic, speech-to-text software that actually gets good and understands pronunciation in different words and accents, things like that. But eventually you're going to be able to get tools that indie developers can use to make AAA games as long as they have the time and the will and the design. That's the thing that you have to have. The technology, the programming is in the engine. The graphics you can either buy off the store or they're built into the engine, or you can, do them yourself to a degree, but that can be done. The voice acting could be done through technology. The design, as long as you have the design and the time, indies eventually might be able to make these kinds of games without $300 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't. Well, okay, maybe for that example, maybe for a first-person shooter, and a pretty basic one at that one. You look at any modern RPG, anything that Bethesda's done in the past 2 years,
Or
Witcher
CD
3 or
Projekt
something
Red.
like that. Those are huge, huge undertakings. Just the amount of content that's available in those games, as far as like for RPGs, quests and things of that nature, the story, the writing, the dialogue, that takes a huge team of people. Then, of course, all of your art assets and the modeling. So it really depends on the scope that you want to include in your
Yeah.
game. If you want to make a big game, you're going to need to have the funding, whether or not that comes from a big publisher, a small publisher, or whether or not you do crowdsourcing. Doesn't matter. The bigger your game is, I mean, the opposite, of course, is, or the alternative is, okay, yeah, go ahead and make that big game with a small team, but it's going to take you years. By the time you even get close to finishing it, it's going to be outdated. Technology, your engine, and all that stuff is going to be outdated compared to what's available. So, I don't think that argument necessarily holds up that well, depending on the game you're looking at.
I think I may have exaggerated for a teeny tiny little bit. But even in that sense, AAA developers being paid by AAA publishers, the AAA games will cost less. If these technologies come along, they can just go with an engine that already exists for many games that they make. The graphics are much easier to make. If they have systems to automatically generate voices and things, then they can have, voice acting is a huge expense.
Yeah.
If they could cut that, that's a huge amount of money that they don't need anymore. So, and if all the technology for the lighting and all this kind of stuff that has to be remade every time they make a new Frozen Byte engine, if they already had all that, the cost of a AAA game would be the design, some of the coding, because a lot of it already exists in the engine, the story writing, stuff like that, the character design, all that. It would be a huge chunk of money that doesn't need to be invested into this game. So,
but that's
less risk for publishers, probably the same amount of time still, but fewer people paid to make the game. I don't know, good and bad.
But that's exactly what people expect from a AAA game, right? You expect voice acting, lifelike animations, the best darn graphics out there.
I want to see the pimples on that person's face.
Which you basically can now, right? I mean, when you saw the close-ups of, I think it was Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, when they're showing the first human face pictures, I mean, it's pretty darn incredible. But what that meant is, what you didn't know is that sure, there's the guys who are making the art and doing the voice acting and all that kind of stuff. But then you have those guys who are digging deep into the code, who are rewriting all this stuff from the ground up all the time. And that all costs money. Maybe there's no incentive besides, it has to be on the next gen and it has to look good. But, I mean, everything costs money, right? And in the end, something like these engines, they're free, but they're also limited to a certain extent, right? And one guy won't be able to make a MMO, right? You have many other considerations. Marketing is one of them, as you were saying earlier. Then you have servers, right? An MMO needs a backend, something, even something as simple as a login, like a login backend. If you want to deploy worldwide, that's also a huge amount of money to have that, cached on CDNs everywhere. And I mean, from the technical side of things, there's also a lot to consider. Something like a single player game that, you download, you install via Steam and you're good to go. That's great. That's easy. And, that's another topic we'll get into, I guess, self-publishing. But, once you get into the realm of multiplayer and, bigger and that sort of stuff, that's when it really starts to take off cost-wise.
Well, I want to go ahead and add to the whole thing about the expectations with the people that are publishing these games, and they put out these huge, massive projects that are supposed to be these amazing games. I mean, look at how much we're spending on these games when they launch. I mean, that's one of the reasons why the expectation is so big. Most games, you're not paying just $60 for. The average game right now that comes out, you're probably paying an upwards of $80+ for the game and the content, if you're not like OPNerd, who waits 2 years for a game to go through and then buy it later, which is more than fine, but a lot of people don't like to wait that long, and that's okay too. But if you look at the fact that, Battlefield, how much was it when the game came out for all the content? Like $110? For $110, I better be getting a lot of gameplay, and I better be getting some of the best damn gameplay I've ever seen. I mean, seriously. That's only fair as a consumer. If I'm going to spend that much money on a game, then I expect to get that quality and voice acting like Liam Neeson in Fallout 3, who was probably like half the budget.
Absolutely. Worth it.
And I think it is important at this point to talk about one of the biggest functions that a publisher does for a lot of their titles, and that is the marketing, because their job in the end, to sum it up, is to sell the game to the public before it's even released. Marketing, it's marketing departments that came up with stuff like pre-orders. Get people to buy the game, to commit to it before it's even released. It's marketing departments that run focus groups. If you don't know what focus groups, I should tell you about this. I used to actually facilitate focus groups for a company that I worked for. A focus group is you get a bunch of people, your demographic, the people that you think that are going to be interested in your products, and you put them together in a room and you expose them to your product. You let them play with it, taste it, whatever the case may be. You know,
Are we still talking about games here?
Well, they do.
What
focus
company
groups for
were you
anything.
working for?
They do
What did they
focus
sell?
groups for ice cream. I sat in front of focus group for ice cream. Baby diapers, you don't want to know about that one. That's anyway. So they get their target demographic to, in this case, play the game, or at least watch videos, and then they get people's feedback. What did you like about what you saw or played? What didn't you like, etc. And then, they get all those results. They take them back to the company and say, okay, this is what gamers like. Now, when you're getting that average consensus about what's good and what's bad, that's how you get these generic cookie cutter reiterations of the same franchise over and over and over again. because focus, yeah, exactly.
As
because
if you needed to cough that out.
While any one person might say, well, this is what I really don't like about the Call of Duty franchise, and this is how it needs to evolve, et cetera, et cetera. As a group in these focus groups, the consensus ends up just getting marginalized and essentially giving these publishers the message, we just want the same thing you've been giving us. We don't feel comfortable when things change. That's also the reason why so many of the games that are published by the big publishers don't deviate too far from the popular genres. That's why a lot of these games that are kind of way out there as far as their concepts or stories are concerned have to be self-published or kickstarted, because a focus group is like, we're not familiar with this. This is kind of weird, so we don't want that game. We want the games that we've always liked and paid for. So the marketing department gets all this information and goes back to the main company itself and the devs and says, this is what people want, and you're going to have to include this, or in some cases exclude this from your game. It's the reason why let's say a shooter that has a very strong story element and is meant to be, experienced at its best as in the single player campaign, gets a multiplayer component added, because people like multiplayer. Multiplayer games make a lot of money, so we got to include a multiplayer in this game, even if it doesn't make sense. That's why those things happen, and that's why you can almost read some of the statements from some developers when they're asked, well, why did you do this with the game and why not? You can tell they're trying to be very, very diplomatic and tactful in their answer, because in the end, they probably didn't want to do some of the things. They did not want to include some of the things that are in those games, but pressure came from the publisher. Hey, we're footing the bill here. You need to include this.
There's a great, just real quickly, talking about you need to include this or that because the focus group liked it. Look at a game like Titanfall, all multiplayer, right? But they had these single player missions in there that were just on the multiplayer maps. They were just a tiny bit scripted, but that was their campaign, right? Or look at Mass Effect 3. They had like a horde mode in there. I personally felt like it was just kind of added on to increase the longevity of the game. I don't think it was. I would have been fine with just the, Mass Effect 1 and 2 were both single player games. There was no multiplayer. It was fine and great. It was great. Why did they suddenly need a multiplayer part to Mass Effect? Mass Effect in itself is a great series. They don't need it.
That's a perfect example.
They put it in.
It's like Elder Scrolls. Like, there was no reason for ESO. Well, just made another game.
I would call
cool,
ESO.
though.
I really like ESO, but it's not.
I can't.
It's an Elder Scrolls game as far as the lore goes and the names of the people, but it's not. It's nothing like Skyrim and all these other games. It uses the same races in the same places, but they play completely differently. I love the game, but it is not an Elder Scrolls game.
And if you look at like Call of Duty, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, they're on the 8th game right now with Advanced Warfare, I think, or is it the 7th game? I don't know. But that's 7 games of essentially the same thing. They just, same shit, better graphics.
Well,
right?
arguably
Different
better
time
graphics.
periods, yeah.
Different,
this much better.
right? But at least something has changed, right? New guns, new sounds, a new campaign, right? And
New
Or at
maps
least the
to
same
play
guns
on.
from
New
3 games
maps.
ago, so people forgot
yeah,
about them by now.
or people even want old guns back, right? I mean, they
Yeah.
want old maps.
And old
them-
maps.
yeah,
do.
exactly. Like
Nuke
just
counts.
today,
has 6 rivets.
yeah, just today, a new map pack was announced for Advanced Warfare, and they're including a map from Modern Warfare 2 in there because people just love that old stuff, so they bring it back. So what are the devs learning or seeing? Oh, people just want the old stuff, and there's a nostalgia factor in there as well that I think we all just need to get over at some point. Just be like, all right, we just need new stuff. But yeah, I mean, we're gonna keep getting Call of Duties until people just run out of money. I mean, that's pretty much it.
It makes me think of I can't remember exact quotes or whatever, but a classic idea is that you go back to before cars were invented and you ask people about their horse carts. And you say, what do you want for travel? And they say, oh, I want more horses on my horse cart. I want better wheels on my horse cart. I want a better horse cart. And then you give them a car and they're blown their mind. They would have never thought about it. That's what AAA publishers go. They go, hey, we've got this new game. It's kind of different to the old game. They're like, but I like the old game. Why don't you give me the old game? I want that other game that you made. Can I have it again, please?
Just
so they
with
make
extra
that
horses.
again.
Yeah.
I just want more horses in my Call of Duty. Which, get onto that. Who are the people who make... is it Activision and somebody else make Call of Duty? Horses in Call of Duty.
Well, there's
I'm
a
telling
lot
you.
of there's,
Activision, Infinity Ward, and Sledgehammer are the 3.
Yeah, those are
and
the ones.
Ravensoft. There's a bunch of other companies. There's the ones that make the mobile side of things, for your phones. There's ones that
Yeah.
I mean, there's 3 different
There's
devs.
ones that
so-
they're like there's a like for the latest iterations they had different developers for the single player and multiplayer.
yeah, it's
which
crazy. The
kind of
right?
makes sense. Oh, and then of course, I mean, you talk about devs and rifts between devs and EA. I mean, the biggest one in a recent history. This is going back 4 or 5 years. Infinity Ward. Infinity Ward is one of the 2 major developers for Call of Duty. They basically trade off every year. One year it's Infinity Ward's product, the next year it's Treyarch. As many of you know, Infinity Ward had a falling out with the publisher, saying that the game made so much money they didn't get the bonuses they were promises. So the 2 head honchos from Infinity Ward plus a lot of their employees, they broke off to form Respawn Entertainment, which made Titanfall.
Which was such a different game.
And of course, there's 2 sides to the story. Activision has their side of the story. In the Infinity Ward guys have their side. Each accusing the other of this and this. It's still going through the court systems as we speak, and will probably be going on for a while. But it's as consumers of the products, we are not in fact, I would say as much as the types of actions that publishers sometimes take may impact us in a negative way, or at least we perceive it negatively, I can assure you, as I was saying earlier, developers feel this as much, if not more, but for business purposes and for the purpose of making money, they can't just come out and say, oh, well, our publishers are assholes. They're treating us like garbage, making us put things, those things, if they come out way later. They come out a year or so after the game has been on the market and has succeeded or failed or whatever the case may be. So, I really feel for them sometimes because I mean, imagine whatever your job is, imagine that you do it really well. And then all of a sudden a new manager or owner comes in and tells you to do your job in a way that is not the best way and is inefficient or the wrong way to do it. And yet, because they're writing your paycheck, you're beholden to do so, lest they just kick you out the door and you have to find a new job.
Yeah, in that sense, developers on a AAA team are 1 in 100, and then just like, hey, we need you to work on jumping physics for the next week. You can be replaced, but an indie dev can't. Anyway, we've talked tons about AAA developers, and I'm sure we will some more. But I wanted to talk about think back to a time before Steam and before GOG, and GOG is only pretty recent with their, I think people just started to take them seriously now that they have GOG Galaxy in open beta. You can actually, it's Steam-like.
Is it just me, but I can't take the word or the name GOG seriously? GOG.
It is
Well,
weird.
it's
Good old
Steam
game.
at least is kind of cool.
Well, you
It's
actually would
GOG.
say GOG. It's
Yeah.
GOG.
I know it's
But it's
GOG,
GOG.
but
It's GOG, but it's GOG.
I don't know.
OPNerd's the only one that says God.
Good old
I'm the only one in the
Gazers.
whole world. Yeah, but
What?
I'm thinking they should change the name to GG soon, Good Games, because they're not just old anymore. They have a lot of recent games coming out. Anyway, but then people will
That's
associate them with
catchy right
esports. Anyway, back before these online distribution methods existed, even before people started selling their own games on their own websites, self-publishing. It didn't happen. You had to go through big publishers. You went through a big publisher and they talked to retail stores and sold your game.
Not true.
Tell me
Sure.
about it, P. You know more about this than I do. Then
Shareware. Now, granted,
okay.
I mean the majority of games would have to go through the process that you are discussing. Either somebody that has the money and there's resources to put your game in a box and put on a retail shelf was the only way you could get it out there. But the shareware model allowed you to release your game free over the internet, or even going back further on a
cereal
BBS.
boxes.
A lot of you wouldn't even know what that is, but BBS bulletin board system, dial-up systems, not internet connection. Anyway, the shareware model was essentially a demo. The probably one of the best known shareware models, because it was one of the most successful, was Doom. Id Software released the first. Doom comes in like 3 sections, 3 episodes or whatever. They released the first episode for free, completely functional. You get through the end of it and it says, oh, by the way, if you really like this, there's more. So send us a check or money order to this address, and we will send you a copy of our game. And technically, the shareware model still isn't in place. Not so much for games, but a lot of applications. A lot of applications are essentially shareware. They're functional either for shareware tends not to bomb out after a certain time, but there's like more features, but you need to pay to get the full product to unlock the full features. I have a stopwatch program that I use that's that way. So the shareware model actually has been around since even before the days of public access to the internet, and a lot of games were sold fairly, successfully. Doom is the biggest success story that I can think of, but there were others that were sold on that model. So you could self-publish in those days. It was more difficult. You still needed to get word of mouth out there. Doom sold well because it was just an amazing game, and it spread like wildfire across the budding internet and the BBS forums, letting people know, hey, you should check this game out. All of the computer stores where I lived, any place that sold PCs or games, would give you a free copy of the shareware version of Doom as long as you bought a disc at their store that they could copy it onto, and it just spread like that. So I hate to burst your bubble there, but yeah.
No, that's
Also,
It's a really neat model, and I actually didn't even realize that it happened like that, because I did have the original Doom when I was young. I remember, I'm pretty sure my dad must have done that then, because I know that we had ended up getting Doom 2, or the next part of it after.
Yeah, the original Doom never had a retail release, at least not initially. Eventually they did release it. Doom 2 saw a retail release on CD-ROM, and I think that it was available on floppies as well. But yeah, that
Pretty
was,
awesome.
I'm
That's
really
cool.
glad you corrected me about that. Just because I do remember getting games out of cereal boxes. I got like Mole's Quest for DOS, and I got Wacky Wheels, which,
Did you
by
get
the way, what a
Chex
train
Quest?
wreck. No, I didn't have Chex Quest, but I had Doom as well. But Wacky Wheels is getting a remake. It's a direct. I saw the Kickstarter for it. It's a direct remake of Wacky Wheels with slightly improved graphics, but the same graphic style. It's like 2D sprites in a flat 3D world driving around like this. It was a great game in 1994 when I was born. But good gravy is at a train wreck. Somebody's like, oh boy, I love Wacky Wheels. That was back when I was a kid. I'll buy the license for it or rent the license so I can remake the same game and nobody will buy it. But anyway, yeah, I'm really glad you corrected me, because I was too young to understand what was going on and how I was getting these games. It's like, oh
You
boy,
may not
open up
even-
my cereal box, get this game.
you may
sweet.
not have even been born at that time when the shareware model was big. I don't know
So
what.
you filled in a big gap in my knowledge right here.
we also have to remember that, like, indie games and self-publishing, completely. I mean, in the term of like the time scale for gaming, completely new. I mean, at first, only computers, and at the beginning, only computers had internet, right? consoles didn't have internet until like I don't even know what generation, but the first, I mean,
Xbox.
Xbox had
PS2
what,
had
2000?
online, but
Dreamcast,
But you didn't
yeah, the
download
PS2,
games.
yeah, let's be real,
You
nobody
didn't
used it.
Yeah, nobody used it because it was bad because the internet just wasn't as it is today, and you also didn't. There wasn't like download services yet for those consoles. You know, multiplayer wasn't really up and running, all that stuff. Nowadays, and with programs like what is it, ID at Xbox, you know, even nowadays, and this is all new stuff, right? Even the Xbox 360 had indie games, but it wasn't like nowadays really anyone can get like an Xbox One, and the Xbox One are, you know, SDKs in themselves, right? You can activate that like SDK mode and you can develop on them, so anyone can technically develop on one. So that enables consoles, which is another huge market for these indie developers to work on. But again, remember, this all started out on PC first because consoles didn't have internet for quite a while, and then when they did, only publishers who had these deals with Microsoft or Sony or Nintendo or, you know, Sega back then, or, you know, stuff like that, with companies that don't really make consoles even anymore, you know, they had deals with them to publish this sort of stuff. So there's the evolution of indie gaming and publishing. There's lots of differences.
Now, I haven't owned a console for a while, but
Except
so
for
correct me if
3DS.
I'm wrong. For the Xbox 360, I have no idea how it may exist on the PlayStation side, but for the Xbox 360 and the Xbox One, these indie games you're talking about, they're available through the Xbox Arcade. Isn't that what they call it?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so I know for the 360, there was a limitation on how big a game could be if you wanted to make it available through the Xbox Arcade Online, because Microsoft also sold a physical version of their Xbox 360 called the Xbox 360 Arcade, which was limited to, I believe, a 4 GB hard drive. So anything that was sold through the arcade marketplace had to be small enough it had a certain size. It couldn't be bigger than, I don't know, 2 gigs, 3 gigs. It had to be able to fit on the 4 gig hard drive, which excludes the majority of these big games. I know a game that I really like, Torchlight, the original Torchlight. They were publishing a version of that it was going to be on the Xbox 360. Unfortunately, it was too big. It went past their size, Microsoft's size limitations, and the developers, which is it Relic? Not Relic. Anyway, the developers of Torchlight said we can't make our game any smaller than it is, and they actually lost a bit of money, you know, given the time and resources that they put into making an Xbox version, which ultimately they couldn't release, and they could not afford to pay the licensing fees to make it a major release for the Xbox 360. So,
And that's when these indie guys back then would run to a publisher who then would say, okay, we'll put your game on these consoles, you know, we'll buy the licensing. However, you know, I'll just throw out a number, 80% of the profit. Yeah, 100% of the profit, exactly, right? So
That's only fair.
yeah, exactly, right? They put in all the work, we'll put it on the console, but we get all the money. So, you know, there's very big differences. And again, nowadays, you know, you can go on Steam, you can greenlight something for what is it, $100? Right?
I didn't
That's
even know
awesome.
what the cost was, but I'm
Yeah, I
assuming
didn't think there was a
there's-
cost, but apparently, you know, Steam has to make money somehow. It's not like they have enough of it. So
Yeah, Greenlight is $100 just to get on. That guarantees no success.
Yeah,
So when you see all
doesn't
these
mean
shitty
anybody's
games
gonna
on Greenlight, those people threw together a shitty game for free in 5 minutes and then spend $100 trying to get it through Greenlight.
/ facepalm.
And then they sell it for 24 cents on Steam and make $2,000, the bastards. Temper
Yeah.
tantrum, anyone?
I don't know.
Anyway, sorry.
That's
yeah,
another
so
podcast.
Yeah.
What is?
You know, and self-publishing, you know, has found its way into other mediums as well, including film and music. You know, there's a pretty popular band, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of, Radiohead, who at one point just said they released an album a few years ago, but I think it was In Rainbows. But anyway, they decided that instead of going through a major music publishing corporation, they were going to release it themselves on their own website, and it also had a pay what you want model. This was before there was such a thing as the Humble Bundle that we're all familiar with, most of us as PC gamers at least. And Yeah, it was. I mean, I don't think there was a minimum amount. If there was, it was probably only $1. But I'm pretty sure there was no amount. So a lot of people downloaded it for free or for 10 cents, and other people paid, what the average price of a CD might have been, $15 or so. And then you had your super hardcore fans of the band that probably paid twice the amount of a CD or more just to show their love and support for the band. So I I don't know. I don't know the timeline of those things to say whether or not um, the PC was responsible for the self-publishing revolution, but my guess would be yes, because it's certainly the platform and certainly the internet that makes that possible. If you have, when we're talking about games here, if you have an idea for a game and you have an internet connection, you can get your game out to the public. Whether anybody is going to care or buy it or even notice that it's out there, that's another story. But any one of us here and anybody watching this podcast can do it.
Yeah, that's the major difference. I don't know how it works with the ID at Xbox program, but I'm pretty sure even they still have to pay some sort of fee. I would assume so, at least. To be published on the Xbox platform, because that does mean they have access to a lot more customers. And you also see, what's interesting is you now also see Xbox, or Microsoft rather, marketing these games, because obviously if they have something released on their system, on their platform, they want that to do well because they're getting a cut at some point of that. So they might as well put a little bit of money towards it and market it. So, either way, it's beneficial to at least the publisher at some point. Always. I don't think you've ever had a publisher who publishes for free.
And the software is what sells the systems. I think we mentioned this in last week's podcast, but the consoles, at least when they're new, when they first come out, as the recent generation did, a year and a half ago, the companies, Sony and Microsoft, sell those at a loss. It costs them more to make them than what the consumer pays for them. But they make up that money and then some with the software sales and the licensing. So the more that is available for a particular system, the more enticing that system is to the consumer, and the more likely they are to make a sale for the unit and software sales overall. Because generally speaking, most people that buy a console, they don't just buy one game or even two games. Initially maybe, but over time they build up a library over the life of the system, and that's where, in time, Microsoft and Sony and possibly other hardware vendors make up their money and start being profitable on those systems.
I think you underestimate the power of shiny things. I think consoles can initially sell with absolutely no games. Just look at, and you said most console gamers would, over the years, get a lot of games. I think most people who own a PS4 or Xbox One at this point still have 2 games. They have Xbox, they have the Master Chief Collection, and they might have like the Forza game or something. Or what's another Xbox game? I don't even know. They're all crap.
Xbox
The
exclusive.
fighting,
Yeah,
the
Xbox
fighting,
exclusive games.
What,
Well,
Killer
but also-
Instinct? Or
Well, who
right?
has
any
Killer
any of the
Instinct?
fighting games are primarily a console thing. Yes,
Well,
there are
Mortal
fighting
Kombat
games for the PC,
just came out.
but
That's
yeah,
like
but
the most recent one.
you watch any of the tournaments that are on like Twitch TV, for example. They're all
Oh, yeah,
playing
they
on the
play.
consoles. The best players are playing on the consoles.
Well, to be fair, that's more like a platform. They're saying if you play on an Xbox at a tournament, it's exactly the same as playing an Xbox at home or playing an Xbox at another tournament or whatever. So there's a reason for that. But
Also,
people who own PS4s still just have knack and they regret it. And then they have I don't know
boy.
what's a PS4
The Order
game? I know there's a good-
1886 that they don't like.
and they regret that too. And there's
any of
one
the
more
Naughty-
PS4 game, I swear.
Any of the Naughty
Bloodborne.
Dog games.
They have Bloodborne and maybe the Naughty Dog games, right? But
Yeah, but
right now,
Bloodborne's a good example, not a bad example.
no, that's what I mean. But console gamers right now, especially PS4 and Xbox One, they own 2 games, and they put their console away, and then they wait. Maybe in 2 months another good game will come out.
It's true. I mean, I had The Witcher, but I upgraded and got a new graphics card. So guess what I did with The Witcher 3 on PS4?
Oh,
It's gone.
you did get your card.
I did. I got the GTX 970
Nice.
Why not a 980?
because I didn't
What a
want to spend more
disappointment.
money. I felt like it was
Yeah.
good. It was a good
Oh,
amount
but
of
why didn't
money
you wait
a
for
good
AMD to
good
bring
card.
out the new 380X, and then why didn't you wait for Intel to bring out their next Titan A. They'll have to go all the way back.
I was
Anyway,
waiting for the Titan squared.
Yeah, the Titan squared.
getting back on track. What do we want to wrap up with here?
Yeah, we're up to. I was just about to mention. Thank you, OP. We're at 5. Well, maybe like 5.5 minutes or something. So it's time for final words. So as always, we'll give OPNerd the pleasure and honor of the first final words. He always has the most to say anyway. So.
I just think it's important to understand when we as gamers, as the consumers, have complaints about how games turn out, how they're marketed, how all these promises are made and then they're broken. I think it's important to understand the process, which I think we covered fairly well here as to what it takes for a game to be made, regardless of whether it's published by a big publisher like EA or on Kickstarter, or maybe smaller publishers like CD Projekt, which for the most part just publish their own things. Because when you understand that, I think you gain some empathy for the developers. And I find it a little bit unfortunate that we didn't have too much time to talk about game developers. I suppose that could be its own show, but really they're kind of stuck in the middle, especially when they're working for a big publisher, because they have to please both us, the consumers of their product, and the shareholders and owners of the company who, above all else, are looking to be profitable. The publishers, generally speaking, don't back a game because, hey, this is like a cool concept. We've never seen this in a game before. Or, hey, this is just something that is going to be of interest to the general public. They're looking at, can this product make money for us? And if they believe the answer is going to be yes, even though that's not always necessarily the case, that's where the backing comes from. And these devs are stuck right in the middle. They're getting it from both sides. It's almost like they're, unless their game is absolutely amazing, they're always going to get it from both sides. And I think it's, important to be, if when a game comes out, before you rush to Steam to leave a review or to whatever forum on Reddit and talk about how terrible this game is and how the developers should all have their families burned alive, keep in mind that that's what they go through, because the more you understand the process, the easier it is to be involved in it, I think, in a constructive way, which ultimately I think is better for the gaming community at large.
Okay, final words. I think that those were pretty thorough. Final words from MrBrotaku.
I'm going to try to keep it simple here, and I'm just going to say that when it comes to publishers, I mean, for me, I'm looking more toward the developer to hopefully not make the mistakes of screwing up the game. But as far as for the publishers, I'm just hoping that they don't push companies to do something like we've seen with Assassin's Creed, because to me that ruins a game, and I don't like to see yearly releases. I honestly would rather wait 6 years for Fallout 4 and it'd be a good game than push out a new game every year and it just be a piece of shit that I regret buying. And I'm just, and then I'm just sad and crying because Fallout was my favorite and then it's gonna be my least favorite. So that's pretty much it for me.
For my final words, you know what? You bring up an interesting thing. I think publishers, they could phrase this in a totally great way, should think more in terms of keeping an old game alive and making new sales. They could release expansions for the old Fallout and things like that every year, instead of a brand new game at full price trying to resell the same game to us. But in essence,
I'd
I
actually
think
be okay with that.
Yeah, I think that would be a really good for publishers. Maybe not as good as releasing the same game over and over and over, but expansions it'd be good for publishers. Continue making profit on an old game without the same investment of work, and fans of the game can still play it without needing a whole new game. But I think in essence on this podcast I'm glad we covered anyway why people say that they hate publishers. So in summary, fuck EA, fuck Ubisoft, fuck Konami, fuck Activision, but don't fuck them too hard, because sometimes, they're not that bad.
Can I get my 5 final words?
Yeah, okay.
5 words.
Yeah, well, before you say your 5, I've got to say the
Just 5.
guest always gets an opportunity to shout their own stream out until a little bit, not too long. Don't spend 5 minutes on it, but a little bit about your stream, what you do, and then we'll wrap it up. Anyway,
So,
go ahead.
I guess I'm the guest. My name is LtRoyalShrimp. Hey, stop counting.
More than
That's
5.
Oh, damn it. Okay. Oh,
You
I
said
thought it was
fine.
final words and okay. Anyways, so yeah, I'm Lieutenant Royal Shrimp. I do variety streams. I play first-person shooters, MMOs, basically the whole shebang. Whatever I feel like playing, I stream. So if you are telling me to play this game, I probably won't play it because I don't feel like it. I play World of Warships. WoW. You know, I've recently been playing Warframe, which is basically Destiny on PC, and a bunch of other fun games. But yeah, and I stream really irregularly because I work and go to college, so I have no set schedule, and sometimes I don't stream for a couple days, sometimes I do. Anyways, my 5 final words would be money talks and BS walks. Remember, guys, vote with your dollar or euro or whatever, ruple.
Monopoly money.
And part of the way
Yeah.
I would choose to interpret that is don't pre-order games, but
Yeah, wait for the
Yeah,
day
exactly.
one reviews.
Don't pre-order games if you know, if you want to change something, they'll respond more to money than words, usually.
Be the change.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Thank you guys, everyone, for hanging out. Thank you guys for being on the podcast. Everyone for watching the podcast. I think it was pretty good. We will be back next week. As usual, I'll come up with some crazy idea for a podcast next week. Anyway, see you guys next week for the podcast. Maybe. I don't think... Are any of you guys streaming? I know OPNerd aren't. MrBrotaku, you streaming after this?
there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll be hosting MrBrotaku, as seems to be our routine at this point. If you guys want to head over to MrBrotaku's channel, what are you playing? Is it...
I'm probably just gonna play an indie game or something because after the stream tonight, it's usually a short stream.
Yeah. Alright, so if you guys want to head over to MrBrotaku's stream, that'd be cool. If not, we will see you, maybe, next week on the next Speakeasy podcast. See you later, everyone.